2014 bourbon. So this is your first product that you're actually like putting out for me since Whistle Pig.
I'm excited too. In my book, this is a real banger. This is a real winner. I mean, I don't know about you, Raj, but bourbon has always had a place near and dear to my soul.
I mean, this is extremely complex.
And what do you look for in a bourbon yourself? What would you say is your ideal flavor profile?
In a bourbon, what I look for in most brown spirits, which is richness and complexity, right?
Of course.
And you have this normally inverse relationship between character and smoothness, you know, which we've talked about. They're normally inversely related. You get a lot of character, not particularly smooth. You get something that's very smooth, it's not normally particularly characterful. And this, at least on the nose, I mean, has a lot going around, firing on all 8.
This was distilled in 2014 in Indiana. The mash bill is quite interesting, I would say. 99% corn, 1% malted barley. And that malted barley is not going to add much flavor. It's strictly there for the starch conversion. So this is a strictly corn grain flavor profile.
And the nutty thing about this is you would think with 99% corn, it would be kind of like boring and
oh
flat.
Yeah, you would. The nutty thing is that it's quite nutty.
It's so rich, so complex. What's the difference between this one? Because we put out a 2013 recently. What's the difference between what we did or the flavor profile that you get in the 14 vintage versus the 13 vintage? And talk briefly about the whole concept of vintage.
Gladly. Now, at face value, you may think these are quite similar. Same mash bill, very similar aging profile. Both spent time in Armagnac casks, albeit quite different casks, which we'll get into. However, that's where the similarities stop, in my opinion. This speaks to the magic of maturation with all brown spirits, and in particular whiskey, in the sense that we could distill 2 different batches one day after another, same day even. Place them in a set of barrels, same warehouse, same location. After 1 year, 2 years, let alone 9 years, those flavor profiles could head in completely different directions. We want to find the casks that are heading towards greatness. A great mixture of grain profile, that's that sort of sweet backbone of the corn, little nutty character as well, some slight baking spices, meshed with the barrel extracts, the oak spice, the vanillins, the caramels on the nose. All of these things coming together for a wonderful, spicy, but not overwhelming finish that sticks with you.
This is not particularly sweet.
It's not. It's
right?
it's not going to chase you away if you like a sweet whiskey like I do myself.
Oh, you like a sweet one?
Oh, I do. I got a sweet tooth, Raj, believe it or not.
Me too.
That doesn't mean I cannot enjoy what I would say, a dry-forward, dry-leaning bourbon. And I think it's stand out for that exact reason myself.
So this bourbon was finished in a 1973 Armagnac cask. And that cask won number one spirit in the world, in a guy named F. Paul Picault Spirits Competition, who's the gold standard. He just retired, so we got his last number 1.
The swan song, huh?
Yeah. We got his last number 1. And I think between the corn mash bill and the depth and the richness of that of that Armagnac, you get a balance. Look, I thought the 2013 vintage, which we put out last year, that won 97 points. The Armagnac won 97. This one has got a little bit more oomph, for lack of a better term. A little bit higher proof. Now, the other thing is it's a smaller release.
Oh, yes. 1,400 cases only.
1,400 cases, which is nothing.
Right. The Armagnac influence couldn't be more different on both of these cask finishes. Again, very similar at face value based bourbons. Talk to me a little bit about how you see the influence of old Armagnac, not just Armagnac casks, but old, rancio-forward Armagnac casks on these well-aged bourbons.
What we're able to do here is combine a bourbon in a beautiful spot. A 10-year-old bourbon is a beautiful spot, okay? It's generally not going to be overaged, but then we're giving it a kiss, but just a kiss of some really, really old spirit. I mean, in this case, 50-year-old from a 1973 Armagnac, opens up an entirely new dimension of age that you wouldn't be able to find in a bourbon because it's a different kind of cask in a way that doesn't overwhelm with it. In terms of all the different whiskeys that you've ever done, you know, having been the distiller at Whistle Pig, working for me there, and here, where does this 2014 rack up in a nutshell?
I think the simplest way to understand my confidence in products is how willing and eager I am to sample people on it. And as you know, I've been quite willing and eager to sample people on this since I joined on, getting their takes, seeing how we can improve it in the last stages of development. This, to me, has to be the best bourbon I've released. I mean, hands down, I can say.
Okay, cheers.
Cheers.
To the best bourbon we've ever released. What's the difference between the aging in the Armagnac between the 2013 vintage and the 2014 vintage? What's the difference beyond the 50-year-old cask in the 1973?
Sure. So while we're using two very different styles of Armagnac cask, we also had a completely different approach to the actual maturation. This 2014 bourbon we identified had a lot more room for a bit of extra flavor, a bit of extra oak extract. Now that may be partially due to the fact that it is about 5 to 6 months younger than our 2013 bourbon. However, as I like to say, unless you're the person who distilled this whiskey, put it in the barrel, watched it every day, fostered it, it's quite difficult to say exactly where the flavors come from. However, this whiskey, with its more accepting flavor profile, still very bright and vibrant, but had room for these sweeter, fruitier, and also deeper, richer, darker back-end notes. We were able to let this 2014 bourbon sit for a full 125 days, which typically, I don't know about you, Raj, I tend to favor a bit of a shorter secondary maturation, a bit of a shorter finish. We want to preserve the character of the base whiskey without overwhelming it with flavor.
This really is a remarkable nose. If you're a bourbon lover, and I like to do this in all the different things, there's not a bourbon that you're going to have tried. Because a lot of people in bourbon, you got a lot of 4, 5, 6-year-old, 7-year-old bourbon. And I'll say, you know, with craft distilleries putting a lot of more aged product out now, you are getting more unique products out in the market.
Yeah.
Before, people were fighting over, like, you know, basically imaginary differences. Now there are some real differences. Even with that said, this is something that you're not going to find anywhere else. You're not going to find a 10-year-old, 99% corn bourbon, unique mash bill, finished in a 50-year-old Armagnac cask for over 120 days. The flavor profile and the result is truly, absolutely unique.
Oh, yes.
It is exquisite. Everybody who tastes this, if you have your taste buds intact, you're going to notice that this really is something unique, and that's really what we like to focus on. Our vintages are all unique. If you have a 2013 bourbon, get the 2014 bourbon and try them side by side.
Oh yeah.
You're going to notice
that
broad
more.
similarities, but you're also going to notice unique particularities, and that's the beauty of vintages. This is an extremely complex, rich bourbon. I'll say it again and again. People have all sorts of different ways. I mean, I was hearing one time in Scotland, this guy says, "Do you taste a little teardrop of an angel?" You know, I don't get that. I don't have that. I don't know what the teardrop of an angel tastes like. But I do know really great spirits, and you want rich, you want complex, you want a lot of flavor. This is barrel strength. This has got it all going on. Fires on all cylinders. Extraordinary.